Good evening and welcome to News Night. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched a new platform to promote transparent taxation today. It seeks to overhaul the relationship between taxpayer and the tax system. It aims to make the tax system seamless, painless and faceless. We will focus on that in the show up ahead. Update also on Rajasthan politics, where BJP is prepping to move motion of no confidence in the state assembly against the Ashok Gehlot-led Congress government. We'll also take stock of the flood situation in the country. All that and more. First, the headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi launches transparent taxation platform, says structural reforms going on in the country will reach to new heights. Tax system will become seamless, painless and faceless. PM appeals to people to come forward and pay taxes. Faceless assessment and taxpayers charter will be implemented from today. Faceless appeal facility will be available by 25th September. Prime Minister says tax system will become fair and taxpayers will become fearless by the faceless system. In Rajasthan, Congress party revokes the suspension of its two MLAs. Sachin Pilot meets Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot at his residence. BJP decides to bring no confidence motion in assembly session starting the next day. Aircraft Accident Investigation Board forms a 5-member panel to inquire into Kozhikode plane crash. Report to be submitted within 5 months. Rivers are flowing in severe situation in Assam, Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. Flood situation continues to remain grim in 16 districts of Bihar. IMD issues warning of heavy rainfall in northwest and central India in the next 48 hours. India touches another peak of highest ever single day recoveries of 56,383 in a single day for COVID. But this number, total recovered COVID-19 patients have touched nearly 17 lakh today. Death rate falls below 2%. Maldives becomes the first neighboring country with which India announces an air bubble. First flight expected from August 18th. Now, honoring the honest is the vision that drives Centre's new platform for transparent taxation. Focus is on 3 key aspects: faceless assessment, faceless appeals and a historic taxpayers charter. In his address, Prime Minister Narendra Modi emphasized that an honest and empowered taxpayer lies at the heart of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Here's more.
Transparent taxation, honoring the honest, ये नए भारत के नए गवर्नेंस मॉडल का प्रयोग है। अब टैक्स सिस्टम भले ही फेसलेस हो रहा है, लेकिन टैक्स पेयर को ये फेयरनेस और फियरलेसनेस का विश्वास देने वाला है।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Thursday launched the platform for transparent taxation with the central theme of honoring the honest. The highlight of the tax reforms centers on making the system seamless, painless and faceless. Faceless assessment and taxpayers charter have come into force with immediate effect. The facility of a faceless appeal will be available for citizens across the country from 25th September.
कोशिश ये है कि हमारी टैक्स प्रणाली सीमलेस हो, पेनलेस हो, फेसलेस हो। सीमलेस यानी टैक्स एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन हर टैक्स पेयर को उलझाने के बजाय समस्या को सुलझाने के लिए काम करे। पेनलेस यानी टेक्नोलॉजी से लेकर रूल्स तक सब कुछ सिंपल हो।
Prime Minister said the initiative builds upon the vision towards minimum government, maximum governance.
इस सिस्टम से करदाता और इनकम टैक्स दफ्तर को जान पहचान बनाने का, प्रभाव और दबाव का मौका अब जीरो हो गया। सब अपने अपने दायित्व के हिसाब से काम करेंगे।
Prime Minister also said that the taxpayer charter will be a major step in India's growth journey. It is a major step in balancing a taxpayer's rights and responsibilities.
हमारे लिए रिफॉर्म का मतलब है रिफॉर्म नीति आधारित हो, टुकड़ों में नहीं हो, होलिस्टिक हो और एक रिफॉर्म दूसरे रिफॉर्म का आधार बने, नए रिफॉर्म का मार्ग बनाए। ये निरंतर सतत चलने वाली प्रक्रिया है। बीते कुछ वर्षों में देश में 1,500 से ज्यादा कानूनों को समाप्त किया गया है।
Referring to the upcoming 74th Independence Day, Prime Minister called upon all to remember the sacrifice of great freedom fighters and urged people to pay their due taxes and contribute to build a new and Atmanirbhar nation.
इतने बड़े देश में सिर्फ 130 करोड़ में से 1.5 करोड़ साथी ही इनकम टैक्स जमा करते हैं। मैं आज देशवासियों से भी आग्रह करूंगा, जो सक्षम है उनको भी आग्रह करूंगा, भिन्न भिन्न करके व्यापार उद्योग के संगठन चलाते हैं उनको भी आग्रह करूंगा। इस पर हम सबको चिंतन करने की जरूरत है। देश को आत्मचिंतन करना होगा और ये हमारा आत्मचिंतन ही आत्मनिर्भर भारत के लिए आवश्यक है, अनिवार्य है।
Honoring the honest, the hashtag used by PM Modi for the launch of the platform for transparent taxation was trending on social media. The holistic tax reforms by the government has started yielding positive results. As an indicator, the number of people filing income tax returns has increased by about 2.5 crores in the last 6 to 7 years.
सबका धन्यवाद करता हूं।
News 9 Desk, DD India.
And industry leaders and tax experts have welcomed the much-needed tax reforms introduced by the government and the transformative potential of making the system more transparent.
Honest taxpayers definitely have a very, very important role in the development of the country, and to give them this type of a boost in terms of their morale and is of great value to everyone. And the government has been committing a transparent tax system, less government in the tax system. This faceless tax system really brings in a huge amount of transparency and a lot of confidence.
Seamless, painless और faceless पूरा टैक्स एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन का जो ऐलान किया गया है, ये ऑनेस्ट टैक्स पेयर के लिए बहुत ही फायदेमंद होगी। फिकी इस चार्टर का और ये ट्रांसपेरेंसी का बहुत स्वागत करती है।
Faceless e-assessment scheme is a bold and a progressive initiative which has a huge potential to bring in greater efficiency, transparency and accountability in the tax administration. Through a completely automated system, the new scheme fundamentally transforms the way the taxpayer and the revenue authorities interact, makes the entire assessment process scientific, and saves time and resources of the taxpayers.
So transparent taxation is a big issue in focus. Now let's broadly look at what this really implies. What are the indicators also that we have which shows an increasing tax base? We'll try and look at some of the broad ideas of what transparent taxation talks about. Three main aspects as we spoke about. Faceless assessment, faceless appeals, taxpayers charter. This defines what transparent taxation talks about. Any assessment other than exception outside of faceless scheme will be invalid. Only in exception cases the faceless transaction and interaction would be suspended. Also another aspect, no intrusive and survey action by field officers. Only investigation wing and TDS wing will have the authority to proceed with any investigations. So a lot of empowerment for the taxpayers in this transparent reform that the government has introduced in the area of taxation. Moving on to the next point, let's look at the features of how this assessment would happen. Appeals to be randomly allotted to any officer in the country. Earlier, they were given circles. That system will change now. The identity of the officer deciding the appeal will remain unknown. Also, there's not going to be any need for a taxpayer or a person to visit the officer or their office in person. So in that manner, it will be a faceless appeal and assessment. The appellate decision will be team-based and review. It will not be one individual officer who will decide the outcome of any case. What are the exceptions in this case? Exceptions are serious frauds, major tax evasion cases, international tax issues, issues relating to a Black Money Act and Benami property. So those exceptions would apply where faceless assessment and appeals would be suspended. Let's now also understand some of the indicators, the way in which tax reforms have been introduced to increase the tax base, deduction collection on tax on new transaction, the reform that was introduced earlier, TDS on cash withdrawal above 1 crore, 20 lakh for non-filers, and TCS, tax collection at source on motor vehicle above 10 lakh. So we see more relief is provided to a larger base of taxpayers. Moving on, deduction collection of tax on new transactions. Tax collection at source as far as foreign remittance under LRS is concerned, above 7.5 lakh. Overseas tour packages that will require tax revelations. Moving on, deduction collections of tax on new transactions, TDS as far as e-commerce suppliers and tax collection at source is concerned on purchase of goods above rupees 50 lakh. So these segments have been clarified clearly in order to make sure that the larger base of taxpayers have relief from tax-related operations. Moving on, cash deposits, withdrawal of rupees 50 lakh or more in current account, the expansion of scope for reporting of transaction. It will only apply to over 50 lakh or more in case of a current account. Expansion of scope, furthermore, cash deposit of rupees 10 lakh or more in non-current account. Also, sale of foreign exchange above 10 lakh will require tax declaration. Again, really focusing on making sure the tax base increases. It becomes a comfortable operation. Tax paying becomes comfortable for the customers. Moving on, the reporting of transactions of mutual funds, credit card transactions, immovable property, etc. is also rationalized so that a significant base of taxpayers also gets relief from such processes. A compulsory filing of return and the mention in case of deposits above rupees 1 crore in current account, also in case of expenditure of rupees 2 lakh on foreign travel, and consumption of travel electricity bills above rupees 1 lakh. In such cases, the mention must be made in return. Again, making the system transparent, but also making sure that corruption is taken care of. Number of taxpayers who access 26AS. We know this is an important form, 26AS. When you're filing your tax, it gives a record of your transactions and tax liability. It has increased over the years. From 2017-18, about 40.58 crore. To financial year 2018-19, it rose to 46.41 crore. And in the last financial year, 2019-20, it rose to 49.77 crore. So more and more people accessing 26AS is an indicator that people are interested in taking care of their tax liabilities. At the same time, there's been a reduction in number of taxpayers selected for scrutiny. The government has been saying again and again, not everyone needs to be scrutinized. The scrutiny reduces, and we see a graph to tell us in what manner it has reduced. 2015-16, 0.71% of the taxpayers were scrutinized, their returns were scrutinized. The number declined 2016-17 to 0.4%. It rose a little in 2017-18, but by the time we come to 2018-19, the number has declined to 0.25%. So more trust by the system, by the government on its taxpayers, so less scrutiny takes place. We know that PAN card, PAN number, PAN allotment is an important indicator of engagement with the tax processes in the country. That also has been increasing significantly, PAN allotment in crores since 2016-17. From 29.44 crore in financial year 2016-17, we see a steady increase, 37.9 in the next financial year, after that 44.57. And by the time we come to 2020, it's a figure till June, 50.95 crore PAN card allotment has taken place. Again, an indicator of the manner in which the population in the country is engaging in their tax liability and filing their taxes. 65% of the PAN holders, individuals, seeded their PAN card with Aadhaar. That's also an important indicator. The regulations, the regulatory identification, curbing of corruption, all those processes take place when the PAN is linked with Aadhaar. So an important process. 65% of the PAN holders, in fact, have already linked their PAN cards with Aadhaar. The limit, of course, has been increased given the pandemic till next year. March is going to be the limit. So those were some of the broad ideas in which transparent taxation is being promoted. We're heading for a short break. When we return, we'll take a closer look at what does it imply for honest taxpayers in the country. A short break. We'll be right back.
A resilient and self-reliant India on the path towards bolstering the economy, turning challenges into opportunities with a vision of vocal for local, futuristic reforms shaping new dreams and building a self-sufficient India. Azad Bharat, Atmanirbhar Bharat on DD News and DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching News Night, and we now come to the issue in focus this evening: tax transparency, mantra for good governance. That's the issue that we are focusing this evening. Two eminent guests are joining me in the program today. And we have with us Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, Principal Economic Advisor, Government of India. Also Senior Journalist Shubhammohan Bhattacharjee, Senior Economic Journalist. A warm welcome, both of you. Mr. Sanyal, if I can begin with you, a lot of thrust today seems to be towards promoting trust as far as the relationship between the system and the taxpayer is concerned. To what extent do you think reforms like a faceless assessment appeals will be taking the power from the system to the taxpayer?
See, that you're absolutely right. The issue of trust has been a major issue as far as the Indian taxation system is concerned. And in fact, the Prime Minister himself said that, this is ironically a legacy of a colonial approach where between the government and the citizen, there was a distrust. And that was perpetuated all the way till today, the 73 years after independence. So that approach is now being changed. This is being done in several ways. First, as you know, a taxpayer charter has been put together, which lays out both the rights and the duties of the average taxpayer. So there are 14 rights and there are 6 obligations of the taxpayer, which lays out, in a sense, the contract between the taxpayer and the tax department. And this is absolutely clear and important because in that sense, it is now very clear that what is it that a taxpayer can expect in return for turning up to pay taxes. So that's one part. The second part is that is the business of faceless. That is, by anonymizing the process, what is happening is that you now have a algorithm-based approach of picking up which tax form will be assessed. So now, and secondly, what will happen? It will now be allocated randomly across the country. So both of them mean that there is no incentive of your local tax official to somehow be targeting you, which had been a very common complaint of taxpayers, that they were targeted, pressured, and there was a large amount of rent seeking. So all of that has now been unwound. Now, of course, there will still be special cases which have been defined, but generally for like the vast majority of taxpayers, their rights are clearly defined, and their processing will be done in an anonymized, faceless way.
Right. Also, Mr. Sanyal, when Prime Minister says that true reform is holistic in nature, the reforms, the transparent taxation platform introduced today, how does that fit into the larger ecosystem of economic reforms, whether we talk about the GST or Vivad Se Vishwas initiative? How do we see it in its entirety?
See, one serious problem with our entire policy-making approach since independence has been is that it is entirely tuned towards trying to catch or punish the non-compliant. without any regard about the inconvenience and harassment of the compliant. So if you happen to be compliant, then you had to comply with all kinds of rules. And all of those rules were ironically put in to try and catch the non-compliant, who of course is outside the system in the first place. So what is being attempted here is to turn this whole thing on its head. And the way it is being done is by making it, first of all, transparent, simple, and then changing the incentive structure of individual departments, etc., such that their focus should be to make sure the person, who are usually the vast majority, who are allowed to live their lives and run their businesses in the easiest possible way. In order to catch the non-compliant, we should not impinge on the lives of the compliant.
Right. Shubhamoy, let me come to you. Traditionally, any reference to income tax officer, whether in real or in popular culture and films, would induce terror. People were seen as, taxpayers were seen as potential defaulters. How far have we come? Were we talking about faceless assessments and the changes that we're seeing in tax culture, tax filing culture in the country in particular?
Shweta, there's two parts to it. One is that in the past couple of years, there's been a series of steps that have been taken to essentially put this bogey to rest, as you pointed out. And the idea that tax meant harassment. So, right from the fact that in the budget this year, there was an announcement by the finance minister that there'll be a taxpayers charter. Today's starting it off is essentially government's implementation of that commitment. So that's a very big step. In addition, right from last year, there have been several series of steps that have been taken. There have been some more earlier, but the ones that are very major is, for instance, linking of PAN and Aadhaar. The e-PAN itself. All of these steps essentially move to make the department more efficient in its transaction with the taxpayers. The measures as taken today, the taxpayers charter and the faceless filing of returns and the faceless assessment, that's a more important part, because faceless filing of return had already started. The faceless assessment is actually the very significant part, which means that the tax department doesn't really get to deal with practically 99.5% or even more, 9.9% of the taxpayers. It simply floats from one place to another, and the tax it's just totally anonymized, and that is what is needed. What it does is it correspondingly also says that the government will be dealing with the taxpayers as some sort of a business. When we walk into any business, when we walk into any shop, we expect a set of obligations and rights that we have. Unfortunately, when dealing with the sovereign, we don't get a sense of those rights or stated obligations. And correspondingly, the relationship becomes extremely, what I might call, individual and sort of a case-to-case basis. And that is not something that an efficient country system should be having.
On that, how clearly do you see, Shubhamoy, is the charter for taxpayers? How clearly does it define the relationship as far as duties and obligations are concerned of the taxpayer?
Very important. But as the Prime Minister himself pointed out, that the tax charter is not something that too many countries have. And it's also not possible. It's only the sign of a mature tax-paying system which can have a tax charter. Because what it does is it says that these are the rights. So when a taxpayer enters into a tax office or deals with the tax department from whichever place, she has the right to expect certain things which are laid down. And that's very important because it's stated out, and those will obviously over the years will be expanded. Similarly, there are of course obligations, but it is something where that sovereign is saying that I bind myself to the doing of these particular things in relation to your transaction with you. It's so significant that actually it changes the very basis of paying taxes. And we are frankly not accustomed to having that sort of a clearly laid down system of transaction with a department like the tax department, because it has often been accused, as you've said, of lots of fairly very individual, very case to case, very random, very arbitrary sort of a thing, and that has changed. So there is a very major difference here, as Sanjeev was pointing out, of having a system which is very predictable, repetitive, and every year it will be the same thing. So it means that essentially the thought among the taxpayers that I'll have to file tax sort of, goes off. It's automatic. It comes along, you file it, and you don't even remember because it's
Right.
systematized. That is what is necessary to bring more people into the tax net.
Right.
And that is what is necessary. Because what it does is then accordingly, the tax department gets totally freed to assess and look into major policy issues and going after those who have a problem with the tax department.
Right.
So that it becomes very focused.
Right. Moving on, Mr. Sanyal, now 1.5 crore taxpayer in a country of 1.3 billion is a worrying figure. Prime Minister also mentioned that in his address. Now, we know that a number of people who are filing returns that has increased. More people are participating in the tax obligations. How do you see this increase, this change over the recent years, and the reform that has been introduced today, making the system more transparent? On the number of people filing taxes, paying taxes.
First of all, when you're talking about the number of people, I mean, we are a poor country, so a very large proportion of the population will not pay taxes, even if you had a completely perfect system. So I think it's not quite fair to compare with the entire population. But nevertheless, our tax base is small. There is no doubt about it. And there were many reasons for that. One of them is that when you have a very complex and opaque system, then nobody wants to engage with it. So there are, many people are willing to pay taxes, but may not want to engage with a system that is arbitrary and cannot be entirely trusted. So once you have a trusted, transparent system, and also a simplified system with moderate tax rates, you will find that the general culture of the country will shift that towards a compliant one. Our problem really is that our general tax culture is a non-compliant one. And then in order to supposedly catch those non-compliant people, we create ever more complicated systems, which in fact don't at all bring in the non-compliant into the system, but in fact all they do is tie up the few compliant guys into knots. So that is basically what we are trying to get out of, to create a system that the average person, the average citizen trusts. It is simple and has more. And by the way, as more people participate, we can even lower the tax rates because more people will pay. So therefore, each individual needs to pay less. So all of those things combined mean that we can expand the tax base. But where do you start? Well, the first place to start is that the tax system itself is trustworthy and the average citizen is willing and happy to engage with it.
Right. Mr. Sanyal, when we see that the tax scrutiny, the rate of tax scrutiny is reduced several times, we also see the increase in more and more people filing taxes, going forth with their tax obligations. But one must also wonder in what ways the system empowered to go after the corrupt, because right now we're talking about relief for the honest taxpayer, celebrating the honesty. But as far as malpractices are concerned, we also spoke about exceptions in the discussion earlier. How empowered, one would wonder, is the system to go after the big fish, as they call them?
I think the system is more than empowered. Many new laws were put in place in the last few years. You have seen, whether it's in terms of fraud with banks and bank loans, or whether it's with taxation, there has been a lot of effort to bring the guilty to book. So that effort is of course ongoing, but I think what was announced today is a somewhat different tack. So it is, and I, at the risk of repeating myself, let me say that all this while the idea was, focus was on bringing the non-compliant and the guilty to book, which of course needs to be done. But I think the thing that the Prime Minister was hinting at today is that from here the approach that is being put together here was to ease the life of those who do comply, which are, by the way, always the majority. And when you make their lives easier, there's ease of doing business, the tax pie expands because people can then, the economy grows and other such things. So in that sense, this taxpayers charter and this anonymization is a very significant step because it signals a change in the entire approach that we are taking. It's a fundamental change. It's not just, yet another step in the milestone. It's a directional change in the way we engage with taxpayers. But of course, this is not just true of taxpayers. You will begin to see this new approach show through in all other facets of policy making, where the starting assumption will be one of trust of the average citizen, as opposed to an approach where the entire rule-making, policy-making approach is almost suspicious of the average citizen, which in the end makes life really complicated and unnecessarily so.
Right. Shubhamay, if we take a little broader view of the tax reforms that were introduced earlier, India has one of the lowest corporate taxes in the world. Now, while economies and firms are jostling with the impact of the pandemic, the tax reforms that we've seen earlier and the ones announced today, what kind of boost do you see they are going to give to Indian firms in particular as they compete within the country and outside?
Shubhendu, you are just now at the initial stage reciting the list of changes in the TPS and the TCS. That's of course income tax, but what it does is it's essentially saying that the government is also, just as it's setting out the charter for rewarding honest taxpayers, it's also correspondingly looking at stiffening the rules for everyone else. Now that's interesting because it shows that there is more to come in this entire thing, which would obviously mean that there's it's a part of a series of changes that's going to happen. Now, if that is so, then obviously the government is looking at a larger change in the taxation rules and regulations, and that would mean and that always has an impact on the collections. So there would be those changes in the collections. And that takes on the question of what you asked about the corporate income tax, the tax that's been paid. This year, the rates, obviously, because of the pandemic, is not really showing up, is not really rising. But while a lot of that, in fact, the overwhelming majority is basically because of the fact that the companies and units and others have a problem and they're not able to pay. They're obviously the bad apples sometimes. And that is where I suppose in a year like this, the government would like to take a bit more keen look on those who could afford to pay and those who are supposed to pay but are not likely to pay.
Right. On that note, Sanjeev Sanyal, Shubhamay Bhattacharjee, thank you very much for joining us in this program, giving us your perspective on the implications of tax transparency. Thanks very much. Moving on, Rajasthan's BJP legislature party met today to chalk out its strategy before the special session of the Assembly on Friday. A decision was taken at the meet to move a motion of no confidence in the State Assembly against the Ashok Gehlot-led Congress government. The opposition party's decision comes days after an amicable resolution of the differences between Gehlot and Sachin Pilot in Rajasthan.
The meeting of the BJP Legislative Party was held in Rajasthan a day before the Assembly session begins in Jaipur. The party has decided to bring a no-confidence motion against the Ashok Gehlot government. The leader of the opposition in the Assembly, Gulab Chand Kataria, claimed that the party is fully prepared to bring a no-confidence motion against the government, though he said that the government may bring a confidence vote on its own. Former Chief Minister Vasundhara Raje also addressed the Legislature Party meeting. She said that the government did nothing in the past 18 months apart from changing the names of the welfare schemes already in place in the state. Briefing the reporters after the meeting, Union Minister Narendra Singh Tomar said that the Congress Party and Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot want to pin the blame on others for their shortcomings. He said that the Congress has not been able to contain its internal squabbling.
कांग्रेस में जो परिस्थिति है वो उनके अंतरंग कर्नल के कारण है और उनके बीच में मतभेदता है, उसके कारण कांग्रेस में टूटन है। भारतीय जनता पार्टी को इससे कोई लेना देना नहीं है और कांग्रेस की सरकार जब भी गिरेगी तो अपने बोझ से ही।
आत्मा सबकी अपनी अपनी है और अंतरात्मा कैसी है ये भविष्य बताएगा, लेकिन हम अपनी जितनी हमारी संख्या है, क्योंकि मैं आज आपको कहूंगा तो फिर अशोक गहलोत जी कह देंगे कि जी बीजेपी ऑफिस में बैठ के सरकार गिरा रहे हैं, तो हमें कोई जल्दबाजी नहीं है। लेकिन ये दूर से किसी भी बिना एस्ट्रोलॉजर के भी कोई बता सकता है कि सरकार का अंतरात्मा की आवाज के बिना भी अंतरात्मा से भी इस सरकार का बहुत लंबा भविष्य नहीं है।
In another development, the Congress is now trying to shore up its numbers and reassuring by all possible ways that the numbers stay with it before the trust vote. Congress General Secretary Avinash Pandey tweeted that the party has revoked the suspension of MLAs Bhavanlal Sharma and Vishwendra Singh. The Congress Legislative Party meeting also began in the evening in Jaipur. After many days of political maneuvers, Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot and his former deputy Sachin Pilot met as Pilot arrived at CM's residence to make peace.
In Vidhan Sabha, Congress party will stand unitedly and will fight out.
Meanwhile, the Rajasthan High Court has posted for hearing on Friday the petitions filed by BJP MLA Madan Dilawar and BSP challenging the merger of 6 MLAs with the Congress. The petitioners have challenged the merger of the 6 MLAs with the Congress and demanded a stay on the execution of the order passed by the Speaker in this regard. All eyes are now on the Assembly session on Friday. The question is, will the crisis in Rajasthan end with the trust vote? News Night Desk, DD News.
Some update on the flood situation. Flood and rain fury has thrown life out of gear in different parts of the country. Flood situation in Bihar continues to be grim. Flood-like situation is also emerging in Orissa. Met Department has predicted heavy rains in Mumbai. National capital Delhi also witnessed heavy spell of rains. Here's a weather roundup.
Heavy rains and devastating floods continue to disrupt life in various parts of the country, including Delhi, NCR, UP, Uttarakhand, Bihar, Assam and Kerala. Flood situation in Bihar is grim. In the last 24 hours, 11 more panchayats got affected by the flood. With this, the number of flood-affected panchayats in the state reached to 1,282. Presently, 16 districts are affected by floods in Bihar. 33 teams of NDRF and SDRF are engaged in rescue and relief operations in the state. As per official data, 25 people have lost their lives due to floods. As of now, 12,500 people are staying in 7 relief camps in different parts of the state. And more than 1,000 community kitchens are providing cooked foods to over 7,70,000 people. So far, more than 7 lakh families have been given financial assistance of 6,000 rupees each as flood relief. In Maharashtra, Mumbai and adjoining areas again received rainfall. MET department has predicted heavy rains in Mumbai, Thane and Raigad. National capital Delhi witnessed the heavy spell of rains which inundated low-lying areas and threw traffic out of gear. Although there's some improvement in flood situation in UP, 523 villages of 16 districts are still affected. People have taken shelter at safer places. NDRF teams have been deputed for rescue and relief operations.
सबका घर द्वार सब बढ़ गया है, नाई को छूटेगा। हम सब भागे भागे घूम बैठा।
कुछ बैराजों से पानी छोड़ा गया है, जिसकी वजह से जल स्तर थोड़ा सा नदी का बढ़ गया है, जिसके कारण थोड़ा सा बाढ़ का पानी आ गया है गाँव में, और जिसके लिए हमने टीमें गठित कर दी हैं जो मौके पे हैं और इस पे पूरी निगरानी रखी हुई है।
Uttarakhand is also facing flood fury. Water level has increased in Mandakini. Administration has cautioned people not to go near the river. Continuous spell of rains in the state has brought life out of gear. In Chamoli, Badrinath National Highway has been blocked due to falling of boulders after heavy rains. Internal roads of Dharchula in Pithoragarh were also blocked due to heavy downpour. Odisha is also facing nature's wrath. There is a flood-like situation in Malkangadi due to heavy rains. Incessant rains also lash some parts of Gujarat. In Rajkot, traffic movement was badly disrupted due to waterlogging. Bureau Report, DD India.
Defence Minister Rajnath Singh launched 4 products, each by OFP and BEML, 2 by BEL, and 1 each by HAL, BDL, MDL, GRSE and GSL. The products have been developed by respective defence PSUs and Ordnance Factory Board as part of Atmanirbhar Bharat Week celebrations. Chief of Defence Staff General Bipin Rawat, Defence Secretary Dr. Ajay Kumar, Secretary Defence Production Raj Kumar were present on the occasion. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said self-reliance in defence manufacturing is one of the key objectives of Atmanirbhar Abhiyan. He expressed confidence that the drive for Atmanirbhar Bharat to realise the goal of self-reliance would give the necessary impetus to India's defence production. He added that concerted efforts being put in by Department of Defence Production to streamline procurement procedures, production policies and indigenization initiatives would assuredly lead to development and manufacture of indigenous defence products. This will bring down our dependence on imports, thereby restricting outflow of foreign exchange. It will also encourage development of domestic industry, insulate India from external pressure and ensure lifetime spares and service support of defence equipments. An offshore patrol vessel OPV of the Indian Coast Guard was launched and rechristened as Indian Coast Guard ship Sarthak by Ms. Veena Ajay Kumar, wife of Defence Secretary Dr. Ajay Kumar. OPV Sarthak is the fourth in the series of OPVs. It has been designed and built indigenously by Goa Shipyard Limited in line with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's vision of Make in India. The ship is fitted by state-of-the-art navigation and communication equipment, sensor and machinery. 105-meter ship displaces approximately 2,350 tons and is propelled by two 9,100 kilowatt diesel engine designed to attain a maximum speed of some 26 knots with endurance of 6,000 nautical miles.
India is an emerging maritime power and our prosperity also depends on the sea. As a responsible maritime power, oceans have been our key priorities, which is evident from Honorable Prime Minister's vision of Sagar that translates to security and growth for all in the region. With increasing maritime threat perceptions, launching of this offshore patrol vessel will add strength to the Indian Coast Guard and provide better peacetime dividends to the nation.
The Air Force Chief today visited Frontline base under the Western Air Command and reviewed the operational readiness of the Air Force base. He also interacted with the Air Warriors. Air Chief Marshal R.K. Bhadoria also flew a MiG-21 Bison jet. Some other news now. Bangalore City Police filed an FIR in the case related to mob violence in Bengaluru East on Tuesday night. Two separate FIR have been filed, one in DJ Ali and KJ Ali. According to the FIRs, 5 people led the gang of some 200 to 300 people and the crowd was asked to hack cops to death. The mob even had plastic bottles filled with petrol which they hurled at the policeman. Residents of Congress MLA Akhanda Srinivasa Murthy was also attacked after the violence broke out. So far, at least 147 people, including MLA's relative, have been arrested and the situation for now is under control, the police informed. The arrested persons have been accused of arson, stone pelting, assault on the police. The police said the accused Naveen has been arrested allegedly for posting controversial material on social media. Meanwhile, in an exclusive conversation with DD News, Bengaluru City Police Commissioner Kamal Pant said the violence in Bengaluru East on Tuesday night broke as police refused to hand over the accused who put controversial social media post. Bangalore City Police Commissioner also said there was no question of any intelligence failure.
The mob violence that shook Bangalore on Tuesday night has really opened eyes for many agencies. To talk more about this, I have with me Bangalore City Police Commissioner Mr. Kamal Pant. Sir, this incident was it really caught everyone by surprise.
If you have been to that area, you will be aware that this is a very congested and densely populated locality. And there are people all around that police station. Right. At any given time there would be some people. So on that particular day, such a large number of people gathered, so it's really a surprise. And there was no reason, no justification to have attacked police.
Was this a planned attack? Did they mobilize the crowd and attack us?
See, we are looking into it, whether there was any effort to mobilize people at short notice. That is also being looked into. We have taken up investigation. Based on the investigation, we will be certainly taking action against if there was any such attempt by anybody.
Right. A lot is being talked about the involvement of SDPI and some organization. The SDPI corporator was there on the spot.
I would not like to comment about investigation which is being done right now. We have video clips, we have statements, we have different types of inputs. and we are analyzing everything. Based on the facts as they emerge during the investigation, we will be taking action. We have already arrested some people. Almost 147 have been arrested. Yeah.
And also there was talk about failure of intelligence.
Everybody has responded. Everybody was there. See, in what way there is intelligence failure? The road was blocked. The vehicles were set on fire. It was very difficult for police to reach there. They could reach only after clearing the debris, and there was crowd everywhere which was resorting to stone pelting. So that's why it took some time for me to reach there. We cleared the whole area, then we reached there. So there was no delay on the part of police, and I won't admit that there was any police failure.
Thank you very much, sir. That was the Commissioner, Mr. Kamal Pant, talking about the investigation which he says is going on, and the investigation will reveal the truth, and the police did act in time, and the violence was brought in control, and peace has been restored in the region. With cameraman Krishna Reddy, Asha Khanam, DD India, Bangalore.
President Nath will address the nation on Friday, August 14, 2020, on the eve of 74th Independence Day. The address will be broadcast from 1900 hours on the entire national network of All India Radio and be telecast over all channels of Doordarshan in Hindi, followed by the English version. The broadcast of the address in Hindi and English on Doordarshan will be followed by broadcast in regional languages by regional channels of Doordarshan. AIR will broadcast regional language versions at 21:30 hours on its respective regional networks. Some other news now. Union INB Minister Prakash Javadekar has said that national education policy focuses on research and innovation. Addressing a webinar on national education policy organized by Vidyapeeth Vikas Manch and Savitribai Phule Pune University, the minister said Indians are contributing their skills in the world's leading companies, including Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Twitter.
आज 5 कंपनियों का माइक्रोसॉफ्ट हो, गूगल हो, फेसबुक हो, ट्विटर हो, उन हर एक में जो मेन टीम है, जो नए नए उनके प्रोडक्ट्स आते हैं, यूटिलिटीज आती है, उसमें भारतीय ब्रेन है। लेकिन भारतीय ब्रेन जो है वो कंट्रीब्यूटर के नाते है, वो ओनरशिप नहीं है। ओनरशिप उसी की आती है जो शोध भी करता है, पेटेंट भी लेता है, उसी के नाम पेटेंट होता है, वो शोध ओनरशिप है। और इसलिए शोध की प्रवृत्ति तैयार करे, ये इस शिक्षा नीति का बहुत बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट हिस्सा है।
The External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and Foreign Minister of Maldives Abdullah Shahid held a meeting through video conferencing. Responding to a request from the government of Maldives, the External Affairs Minister announced India's decision to support the implementation of Greater Malay Connectivity Project or GMCP in Maldives through a financial package comprising a grant of $100 million and a new line of credit of $400 million. External Affairs Minister announced that a direct cargo ferry service will commence shortly between the two nations. Jaishankar underscored the significance of the service in enhancing bilateral trade and connectivity and in further boosting economic partnership between the two countries. External Affairs Minister also announced creation of an air travel bubble between India and Maldives to facilitate movement of people from both the sides. Maldives is the first neighboring country which by an air bubble is being operationalized with India. The first flight under the air bubble is expected to commence on August 18th. The minister also conveyed the decision to renew quotas for supply of essential commodities to Maldives for the year 2020-21. Commodities include food items like potatoes, onion, rice, wheat, flour, sugar, dals, eggs, as well as river sand and stone aggregates. Given the financial challenges faced by Maldives due to COVID-19 situation, India has decided to extend in principle urgent financial assistance to the government of Maldives by way of a soft loan arrangement. Time now for some more news and updates from across the nation.
The Aircraft Accident Investigation Board has formed a 5-member panel to inquire into the circumstances of a plane crash in Kerala's Kozhikode airport last week, in which 18 people were killed. In a statement, the board said the investigator in charge will complete its inquiry and submit the report to AIIB, India, preferably within 5 months from the date of the issue of this order. The Supreme Court has stayed the Delhi High Court order of contempt of court proceedings against Environment, Forest and Climate Change Ministry for not publishing draft on environment impact assessment in multiple regional languages. The Supreme Court has suggested to the central government to amend the official language rules under which there is a provision to publish the draft in Hindi and English only. The Supreme Court has adjourned the hearing of a PIL filed by Advocate Ajay Agarwal for a CBI probe into Sushant Singh Rajput death case to August 21st. Advocate Ajay Agarwal has questioned the investigation process being carried out by Mumbai police in the case. Rajya Sabha Chairman and Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu planted Rudraksh tree sapling in Parliament House in front of gate number 11 on the occasion of completion of his 3 years in office. Rudraksh is a medicinal plant used to cure various diseases. It grows in Bihar, Assam, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra and Nepal. Kerala Governor Arif Mohammed Khan and Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan have visited the landslide site of Rajmala in Idukki district. At least 55 people have died in the incident so far. The leaders interacted with the locals while reviewed the relief work during the visit. The Chief Minister also assured to reconstruct the damaged houses. The DMK dismissed its MLA KK Selvam from the primary membership of the party for indulging in anti-party activities. Selvam was recently suspended from the party after he met BJP National President JP Nath in New Delhi on August 4. In a tweet, MOS in PMO Jitendra Singh shared the information that Medical Council of India does not recognize any medical qualification obtained from medical colleges located in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. MCI will not register persons possessing such certificates and they won't be allowed to practice modern medicine in India. In Jammu and Kashmir, a joint team of security forces has busted 2 terrorist hideouts during search operation in Pulwama district. Huge amount of ammunition and other materials have been recovered from these LET militant targets. Besides ammonium nitrate, 1989 AK rounds, 2 hand grenades, UBGL thrower and 4 UBGL grenades were also recovered.
And a false claim is doing rounds on social media. The PIB fact-check team says that a document is being shared on social media as the new Taxpayer Charter of India. It's a fake document. The document is Taxpayers Charter of a foreign country. It's not of India. In another clarification, PIB fact-check team has said that a news agency's report that central government has decided to not reopen schools until December is false. The government has not made any such decision. It's important fake news busted by PIB. And now time for some COVID-19 related updates from across the country.
India has created a new record in terms of COVID-19 recoveries as 56,383 people were cured from COVID-19 in one day. The total recoveries now stand at nearly 17 lakh. The centre has said it has been possible due to the collective efforts of the centre, states and healthcare workers. These efforts have resulted in effective implementation of the testing, connectivity and treatment policy of the country. The recovery rate has improved to 70.77%, while the mortality rate dipped to 1.96%. Union Minister Jaishankar visited the Patna Medical College and Hospital to review the situation and preparedness to fight COVID-19. He visited the coronavirus ward and hailed the doctors and nurses working there. He later held discussions with the Dean, Dr. Vinod Kumar Singh. Former Karnataka Chief Minister Siddaramaiah, who was undergoing treatment at a private hospital for COVID-19 infection, has been discharged after recovery. Siddaramaiah has been discharged after he tested negative for the second time. Siddaramaiah was admitted to hospital on August 3rd for a urinary infection and subsequently he had tested positive for coronavirus infection. He has been advised to be in home isolation. Ganesh Chaturthi will be celebrated in Tamil Nadu on August 22nd. People have been advised to celebrate Vinayak Chaturthi at their homes to curtail COVID-19 spread. The state government has issued a directive saying that no idols will be installed in public and no rallies to immerse idols in water bodies will be allowed. 40 police personnel of Chennai Police donated blood plasma at Chennai's Rajiv Gandhi General Hospital. State Health Minister Dr. C. Jaishankar was also present. Chennai Police Commissioner has said that other personnel who have recovered from COVID-19 are also willing to donate plasma. Bhubaneswar Police Commissioner has requested the public to avoid large religious gatherings in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. In view of the situation, no permission has been granted to celebrate Ganesh Puja at the community level.
Some update now from the American politics. Democrat Joe Biden and Kamala Harris make their first joint campaign appearance in Delaware. Biden said Harris personally knows challenges faced by Black and Indian Americans. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump was quick to take aim at Senator Harris, pointing to her withdrawal from U.S. presidential race last December. Here's more.
Kamala Harris has had your back, and now we have to have her back. On January 20th, 2021, we're all going to watch Senator Harris raise her right hand and swear the oath of office as the first woman ever to serve in the second highest office in America, in this land.
I am incredibly honored by this responsibility, and I'm ready to get to work. And Joe, I'm so proud to stand with you. And I do so mindful of all the heroic and ambitious women before me, whose sacrifice, determination, and resilience makes my presence here today even possible.
And that's how Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden and his running mate, U.S. Senator Kamala Harris, made their first joint campaign appearance in Wilmington, Delaware, a day after Harris emerged as Biden's vice presidential choice. U.S. President Donald Trump was quick to take aim at Senator Harris, pointing to her withdrawal from the U.S. presidential race last December.
I was surprised that he picked her, very surprised. She ran and she went down to rock bottom. You don't want to pick somebody that went down. She went down.
In Delhi, Harris's maternal uncle, Gopalan Balachandran, remembers her connect with India and all that she holds dear about India. Senator Harris is the daughter of two immigrants, her mother from India and her father from Jamaica. And she had reflected on her early visits to her grandparents in Chennai in a speech in 2018.
She's Indian. She's also Jamaican. She's Afro-American. She uses her own judgment. She likes India. She likes Indian music, but she likes jazz music also.
Adulation for Harris poured in from across India as residents in Indian cities resonated Gopalan's sentiments.
Being an Indian, I'm feeling very proud that she's from Indian origin, and as far as my knowledge goes, she's been creating history from the very beginning. She was the first Attorney General, and then now that she's been nominated,
feel proud of it, that one of their own kin is expected to be the next Vice President of the United States. It's such a huge and big country, and we are very proud.
As a woman, I'm very proud of Kamala Harris.
In another development that is likely to impact the discourse on the immigrant policy ahead of the November 3 presidential election, the US government announced national interest exceptions to presidential proclamations that had suspended the entry of immigrants and non-immigrants, presenting a risk to the US labor market during the economic recovery following the COVID-19 outbreak. In a move that could help Indian IT professionals and those working in the healthcare sector, the Trump administration announced certain exemptions in H-1B and L-1 travel ban for those continuing employment with the same employer. Donald Trump and Joe Biden sharply differ on immigration, and Biden has praised Harris as a child of immigrants who personally knows the challenges faced by the Black and Indian American people in the United States. The issue of immigration may further gather steam as the campaign for the White House enters a more frenetic phase. News Night Desk, DD News.
And back home, run-up to Independence Day event is traditionally marked by musical performances by bands from the Army, Navy, Indian Air Force. The Band of Tri-Service of Indian Armed Forces is giving musical performances at various places across the country ahead of Independence Day. One such performance was presented in Lucknow and Faizabad in Uttar Pradesh. The Army also presented musical performances in Motihari, Bihar and Madurai in Tamil Nadu. And on that inspiring note, we conclude this edition of News Night. Namaskar.